are better off taking the programmer's advice and then holding them to it. Wait, I did it the way you said. Don't tell me that it's now taking you longer, because otherwise you're going to find yourself again back in that situation where they'll spend a lot of times documenting they met scope and very little time actually writing code.
Yep, that's right. This one section here, as we designed this and laid it out, I thought about how much aggravation and money and stress it would have saved me had I had this information. One of the things we talked about was pricing, right? Good, fast, and cheap. And you can't get all three, can you?
Now, that's true of everything. It's going back to my hotel example. Good, fast, cheap, pick two. It's basic project management. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Anytime you're going to have to get something together and make a choice, you're always making a trade-off. Am I getting it's good? Am I getting the best that's out there? Am I going to get it fast? Can I get it faster? Yeah, if you pay more. Or cheap. How expensive is it? The faster you want it, the more expensive something is. All right? And it just depends on your approach to your project. There are projects out there you need it fast. You got a window. Well, guess what? At that point, don't start shopping dollars. Start shopping who's fast, who's very reliable. That's where those trade-offs come off in that chart I passed out sometimes too, is thinking about it. Know what your risk is for what happens if it fails. What happens if you don't like the work that they're doing? What happens if they can't do it? If speed's of the essence, you can't allow as many risks in the middle column then. Good, fast, cheap, pick two. For most startups, fast is the one that gives. Most people want it good and they want it cheap. So they tend to push back fast, and that's the most common thing. If you don't want that to happen to your project, then make that mental note to yourself. I can't have it pushing back. I need to make the schedule, in which case start willing to give up good. What's that? In software terms, let's give up some features. Maybe we don't have to do 18 things. Maybe the top 5 we need to do are really the ones that people are going to remember us for. So you give up features. That doesn't mean those 5 are bad. That just means that it's no longer the total of what you were looking to do. It's a trade-off. Everything's just a trade-off. And that's what you really need to do. You need to either manage your own project or get a good project manager in there to help you understand that at every point. Preferably one that can give you that, that estimation when you're throwing rocks against something and tell you, if we do that, it's great, but it's going to add another month.
A couple more points. This might be obvious to you, but hire somebody you like. And it sounds simple, but I see a lot of head shaking out there, right? We've all made that mistake. You got that feeling, you didn't really like him, but it's okay, the guy's really good. I'll hire him anyway. And then down the road, guess what happened? It didn't turn out so good. So write that down. The other thing is get references. It's going to take you longer to get started to get references, but it's worth it. And get the correct references. So talk to people, okay, and ask them specifically, number one, what did they build for you? And take a look at it, okay? So if you're looking to get an application built, but you're talking to a person that got a website built, those are two different things. Those are two different things. Secondly,
I was going to say, not only that, you have to know what their role was on that project. A lot of times they're only one of a team. Maybe they were on the team that accomplished this particular task or built this program, but their role was code testing, or their role was only handling one small piece of it. So when you're checking the reference, you have to know exactly what their role was in the project that you're checking on.
So we got references. You can make calls, and I think you wrote on here Odesk, Elance, and Guru. They allow you to, because you can see their portfolio.
You can, a lot of times you'll have online places where you can go to get references on their people as part of the process. It's a good, nice way to start, just on seeing what recommendations they already have available online, specific to the technology you're interested in following.
Okay, great. Contract terms, from a developer's perspective, anything here you wanted to add?
No, it was just a nice link that
Okay.
tells you how the programmer sees the conversation. It's always nice to understand the other person's point of view. So that's an article on how programmers look on who they want to sell their services to.
Okay. We're running a little bit behind here. Another thing was, hey, if I outsource to India, what stops these people from stealing my idea? Right? I start to move forward with it. That's kind of comes with, the territory, right? If you don't know who you're doing business with, that is a risk you take. So, yes, you can get, non-disclosure agreements. I don't know how enforceable they are in Bangladesh. Me, I'm going to have to go over there and enforce it. I really don't know. Again, that's the risk you take. If you're hiring somebody local or you're doing a managed solution, it's a little bit more enforceable. Okay, let's keep moving to design phase. Chip, you talked about, think about in advance, not just developing something cool, but developing a solution for your customer. So who is your customer and how much are they willing to pay for your widget? I hear a lot of startups that say, man, we got this really cool technology, and they haven't identified the customer. Who is going to be using it, and how important is it to them? I heard there's a new app out there. It's running around LA, and it allows you to do like a Twitter for your idea. So you kind of just tweet out, my idea is to solve this problem. And then people will just respond back with, pretty harsh criticism, which is, this problem is silly. It's not big enough. Forget it. Keep moving on. And you'll quickly learn how big of a problem that you're trying to solve is. Don't spend a year trying to solve something that nobody cares or very few people care that it gets solved. I know you're shaking your head. I know you're smiling. It can cause you a lot of frustration and sadness because you look at yourself and go, I'm a loser to spend a whole year on this and nobody cares. So think about it up front. When designing things simple, we talked about it's not the site with the most features. Think about the most popular sites on the web now. It's not because they have tons of bells and whistles. Facebook. If you've tried to do anything with Facebook beyond, upload a picture or make a post, it's terrible, right? Trying to find your profile and your your security questions and making sure your data doesn't go out to freaks all over the world. You can't even find out where that is. It's the biggest app in the whole world, right? Twitter is the same way. I think we talked about Google as well. Simple. How about check the Microsoft Solutions Framework? Do you want to add anything on that, on methodology of development?
A large chunk of that's in the handout I gave out.
Okay,
so.
Good. Agile, we talked about that. SEO and marketing early on.
Yeah, and to that we'll go to platforms too, content management platforms. You want to be, again, conscious of what you're trying to accomplish before you start the project. So you can make some decisions on things like a development platform, development languages, and specific to SEO, how SEO type of technologies are going to work in with what you are trying to build. If you're building something that's a web-based login system for users that have to log into your system, you still need content then outside the system for the search engines to be able to find you, even if there's only information only for the members within it. So that changes some of your development and even some of your business plan perhaps on how you approach that, just to be able to know that without free content, without stuff out there to build an SEO around, the search engines aren't going to find you. If you're going to go to try to create Twitter interest or Facebook interest or something else like that, you still have to have some web presence necessary to bring that all in together, and a way to actually manage all of that. And all of that should be part of your head, part of your thinking, before you've even gone and started writing the first contract for programmers.
Made that mistake. Okay? What did I do? Assumed the people I hired were thinking about that. Guess what? Weren't thinking about that. So I missed out on a lot that I had to go back in later and make those changes. Think about that. Understand, guys, if you don't need to learn how to program. You don't need to learn how to become a user experience guy. You don't need to become an expert in content management systems. But read a book on marketing and SEO. No, that's a little bit too complicated for me. I promise you, read that book. You will start to open up new doors in your brain on how to quickly push your product out there all over the world. Once I did that, I was then instructing my developer team, who quote-unquote were SEO experts, right? All of a sudden, I was showing them, oh, no, here's why we're doing it. And they're looking at me like, why would you want to do that? Here's why. You want to start figuring out your plan and then build your app around that. It's going to save you tons of time and stress and Pepto-Bismol. I promise you that.
Google has, with their AdWords program, they have, and Bobby, they give you like a free $100 to spend when you do that. Google will give you $100 to use their services. You can sign on with an AdWords account, use their money to play around with. They have good tutorials. They have good ways to do it. AdWords is a good way to start poking at the SEO space, and then they have even more information in the background there on what else you can do, because an SEO plan might have a paid advertising component too, but either way, those concepts still play into it, and it's good free advertising or education.
Yeah, that's actually going to be another topic all on its own. SEO and inbound marketing. It's way too important to not do a topic. So that's coming up in 2 months. Get ready for that. But a couple of things like, just an example so you know what I'm talking about. Having the URL on every page SEO friendly. So you want that page to be found for whatever those keywords are. You want to be known for, Thor PlayStation game. You want to have that in your URL. You want to have it in your heading, in your tags. You want to find out what is important to Google to bring people in and what is not. Don't think that you're going to assume that it's all going to flow out. Content management. So I don't think we need to get into CMS, but you should certainly have a discussion with the developer about what CMS is most applicable to your project.
Yeah,
right?
Most developers will already have their suggested. It's part of your review with them. And let them sell you. This is the platform we like. This is the CMS we like. This is the language we like. Let them sell you, but in the background, go research everything they're telling you and find out what your comfort level is. It's probably not something you're going to pick. It's probably something the developer picks. Or if you pick it, then you limit your developers to only people that's what they do.
Here's I think this is on your sheet. Design is an art, not an afterthought. It is function, not form. Steve Jobs wrote that. What you want to be thinking about, how many people here have used a website that was beautiful? It looked really cool, and it was lousy to use, right? So that's your example right there. And who here has used this website that wasn't pretty, but it allowed you to do the thing you wanted to do really quick, right? That's where you want to be. I mean, Craigslist, oh my goodness. And the guy, Craig Newmark, won't change it, right? Because it's successful. That interface has worked now for a long time. It's one of the biggest internet sites out there. But it's not pretty. Think more towards that and less towards those beautiful sites. Okay, do you have flexibility in your design to pivot? This is critical. Talk about a pivot and how often that's going to happen.
Right. I mentioned pivoting a couple of times. Let's remind ourselves we're going to sell something at the end of this. Unless your entire business plan is to create another, Facebook, and you're going to give it away for free to millions of people before there's even a dime available, in which case have your business plan ready to go to raise all that money now. You're going to have customers. And when you have customers, you have to know what they're willing to spend. And as you're talking to them and as you're showing them, especially early concepts, your first tests, you should have testers out of your customer base or pseudo-customers or their friends and family, whatever, that can act as customers, that can then come back and tell you. They may come back at some point and say, you know what, this isn't going to be worth, $5 a month to me, or I wouldn't pay $30 for this, but I'd pay 10. Now you look at maybe reducing your feature set, or maybe they come back and say, I would pay more if it did this. Now you're adding features and you're pivoting. Very, very seldom is your idea of the business plan when you engage the programmers the same as what you deliver to the customer a year later. Almost always it's changed in some significant way.
No, it's
and
always.
The true is, and it's true just of any startup business at all, is once you actually engage with the customers, your business model changes. Mm-hmm. And if you hadn't approached the entire development process to understand you could make changes, then those changes are very costly. So you have to pay a lot of attention to what programming methods your team's bringing into it so that they can assure you that a significant change does not mean a major setback. It just means there's some extra work.
Let me share with you another key point that we had a conversation when Chip and I first met a while back. We talked about something called a prototype. So your app is going to cost you, we'll say, $80,000 to get done, right? That's your budget. And you're like, you can write a check for $80,000, it just won't cash, right? But Chip talked to me something called a prototype. Maybe you develop a much smaller version, a simpler version of your product for about 1/10 of the price. He talked about using just an Access database on the back end. Now, once you put it out there and nobody cares, I'm out $5,000. If people start to care and they start to use the site and it starts to slow down a little bit, you go, I think I might have something here, right? So you've kind of thrown a line in the water and you're starting to pull it in and people are biting and you're like, I think I might. Then you turn the chip and go, okay, let's build the full boat, right?
Right. And it's especially valuable if you think about the fact that Again, from a pivot standpoint, it's easier to pivot on a prototype than it is when you're trying to do the full system. It's much easier to pivot if you're not worrying about things like user logons, validation, security of data, and all those other things that you're eventually going to have to worry about. But right now, you just want to see if people are going to use your system, or you want a good idea. You mentioned earlier about people stealing your code from somewhere else. And remember, as soon as you publish it, put it out there, it's there. Someone could see it. Guess what? Once they see it, it's a prototype. It's really easy to go out and copy someone else's existing code. It's really easy to go out and copy someone else's unique idea. You have to be prepared to still win. You won't have that big a window. Okay, so whether the theft comes from Santa Monica or New Jersey, some other country, the fact is you have to be able to still win on your business model. Prototyping is a good way to do things fast and see what works on your way to actually then creating a full-blown model. A lot of times, working prototypes all you need for funding too.
Right. Once you show them a working product, then they can get excited about that, as opposed to spending a year in development. Okay, a lot of talk up front, and some of you guys are technical, some of you are not, but you'll hear some things like, should I do PHP, MySQL, Microsoft.NET, Ruby on Rails, right? You'll see all these things around, and some of you guys are like, your eyes rolling back in your head, and you're thinking, I don't even know what these things are. I don't want to spend time on that because that's a very big topic. But I think the big one here is, do we do open source versus .NET, right? That's probably one of the bigger arguments.
.NET is open source versus, I don't know, there's all kinds of closed source out there. Open source is getting bigger and bigger.
Okay.
One of the main trade-offs on open source is everyone else has access to that same code base too. And again, it makes it easier for someone to copy what you've got. It's a little bit harder to make your product unique when you're relying on open source. And sometimes you're a lot more at the mercy of something completely unexpected, either a security flaw or a problem with the open source code that you bought that you assumed was going to be good that now has a problem somewhere in there. And that makes things a little bit less predictable. All those trade-offs are generally worth it because go back to logons. Every single system that's out there that has a logon required to get in has the same set of core requirements. I need to have a username, password, I need to have password recovery. Why write all of that? Go out to the open source community and get one that works and get one that's validated and secure and it's going to remain supported and the people are going to do upgrades on rather than trying to write your own. It's always better to do that than to try to reinvent the wheel.
One of the things we talked about was I developed a product in using MySQL. And I asked Chip, what was your opinion on this? And he kind of just looked at me and said, I know if I look at a customer and they are thinking about that, I know in 10 years the Microsoft product will be supported. And I thought, that pretty much hits it on the head, doesn't it? I mean, Microsoft's going to be there in 10 years. So as a developer, he's pretty confident that if he went that route, he'll be okay in 10 years. Let's keep it moving here. Testing. One of the things Chip wrote in here was never let your programmers test their own code. Does anybody know why? It doesn't need any testing, right? I made it. It's all set. We can
I
skip
tested
that.
it when
Check.
I wrote it.
I fell for that too, guys.
I know that worked 2 weeks ago when I wrote that code. I didn't have to try it now.
Or worse yet, you become the tester. I suddenly put myself out for free to test out my own product. Ease of use, never let programmers determine. Okay, just because they can program does not mean they understand a user experience. In fact, many times, very different. So understand that's a whole different role. I think you wrote in here there were 5 roles to a project. That's in your sheet, right? And one of the roles you want to have is somebody that understands the customer and how they're going to use your application, and is it easy enough to use? Okay, keep that in mind, because your programmer will make it work. That doesn't mean anybody else can figure out how to use it.
Yeah, in the handout there's a discussion of the Microsoft Foundation methodology, and they go and they put out guidelines like having a user advocate, customer advocate, whose role on the team is to take the customer's point of view and argue in those intense meetings on what the customer is going to ask for without having to have your customers in that meeting. Again, it just depends on the size of the project, number of people, as to how much you can divide up these these roles, but you still have to have someone thinking that. Someone has to be willing to wear that hat for the customer.
Yeah. So the roles are what?
You've got basically the project manager, the developer, the tester, the customer advocate, and
Anybody else for a free candy bar? What's number 5?
the guy that brings the Diet Cokes at 11 o'clock at night.
I don't have it on here.
Oh, could be.
Here we go. Hire a consultant to manage the efforts. No, I don't have it on here. Okay.
Microsoft is documented with the way they see it happening out in there. They use bigger teams than we use when we do our projects. We assign those roles out across multiple people. You have a person wear 2 different hats sometimes.
Okay. One of the ways, when we talk about testing, one of the ways you can get around that is maybe having a beta test, right? Slap the word beta on there, now you have a license to kill, right? You can do whatever you want. And if it crashes, nobody cares. Think about a couple of key points. We're not going to discuss them, but install and upgrades. So what I did, I made this mistake, was we used a content management system, and then we developed code around that. Well, I didn't, but we did as a team, right? Guess what happens when the content management system needs to get upgraded? Yeah. Yeah, so if you upgrade that, then also you got to upgrade all your code too. Think about that ahead of time. And that was it. Thank you, Chip.
Welcome.
Guys, Chip Meyer. Thanks, buddy.